5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Please do not change channel.
From Krypton Radio, brought to you by Famous Faces and Funnies and Off the Chain with Yvonne Mason, it's the Hanging with Web Show Radio Hour, the Internet's premier pop culture talk radio show. You're tuned in, you're logged on, and now your hosts, GW Pomichter and Christian Basel. Who are you hanging with?
All right, hello, World Wide Web. Welcome back. Welcome back to Krypton Radio. This is the Hanging with Web Show's Radio Hour. I'm GW Pomichter.
I'm Christian Basel. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hanging With.
That's right. That's right.
I was trying to get goofy.
And that's what we're going to do tonight. We are going to hang out. We're going to talk about writing. What it's like to be a writer. And
I haven't done that in a while. I have not written a play in like decades.
Decades? That is a while. I was about to get all over myself because I'm in the middle of my sixth novel, and I've taken like a month and a half where I haven't written a word, and I felt really bad about that until you just said decades, and now I don't feel as bad as I once did about it. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Before we jump into that, though, we want everybody to know what's going on in the world of pop culture. So, you know,
hello. I have got some news for everybody. This is Sage Ia, and I have your pop culture news bits. Announced by Marvel and IMAX, which was first reported by Mashable, Marvel is celebrating 10 years of filmmaking with Marvel Studios' 10th Anniversary Film Festival. And we will see all 20 MCU films re-released in IMAX form. And that will be from August 30th to September 6th.
Sweet.
That is pretty awesome. Yes.
Didn't they do something like that before Avengers? Before the Infinity War? Didn't they have like a day where they were running all, I think it was at the time like 15 or 16 at the moment?
Well, this time it's all IMAX. And some of them have
That's
never
all
been...
IMAX?
Yeah, some of them have never been released in IMAX before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's, well, you know, we don't have anything. We have to wait at least until March of 2019 for Captain Marvel. So this is the way that we can indulge in the MCU.
That's it. Hey, I'm not a big. I don't know. The all-encompassing IMAX, huge. I'm not a huge fan. I like a regular movie. I don't know why. I'm old school. Weird.
I got a question. Do you think society is now getting into comic book fatigue with movies?
No, not at all.
Really?
Actually, no, I don't. I really don't. I don't, and I don't think they will for a while. As long as the content keeps coming and it's fresh and it's creative, I think they'll keep watching. And I think we're going to see more, less center, more indie stuff. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that stuff come to the small screen, and I think inevitably it'll work its way to the big screen. Comics have always been a source of great creative material, and I don't think people are materialed out on the big screen. In fact, if anything, I would credit comics and comic culture for making the movies hot again.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that because, you know, earlier this month, the Academy of Motion Pictures of Arts and Sciences, they added a new category for outstanding achievement in popular film.
Yeah, and I think that was very controversial. It was just about a week or so ago. It was a very, very controversial move because one of the big things was what is going to define a popular film, as opposed to the normal stuff that is Oscar bait. You know, what's going to be a popular film? What's going to define that category? But I think that's what's going to define it. There are going to be movies that draw a large box office, that are very commercially successful, and that people want to see over and over and over again. And I think comic book culture is what has brought that back to the big screen, because there was a decade or so in there Marvel franchise and DC franchise, and there was a decade in there when people weren't going to the movies. Streaming was very new, very, very new, and DVDs were hot and cheap. And, anybody out there that might remember what a VHS was, those were going the way of the dodo.
I'm just going to
I won't say my age.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's just it. And people were staying home more. And there was a Blockbuster on every corner. Poor guys, they didn't see the digital thing coming. But people were staying home a lot more. People are going to the movies again, and they're doing it for big events. It's not like when you go to the movies, it's like, oh, I'm just going to the movies on a Friday night. People will save for 2 or 3 months and go to the big movie, the one that they want to see. And the numbers bear that out, because the big box office numbers, ticket prices, they're not going down, but they haven't gone up in a little bit, and they're still breaking the billions of dollars.
Well, and it's not just the movie itself. I know that, we love to go to those big, huge premieres because people cosplay, and it's just everybody gets into the universe, and they talk beforehand, or they'll play games, and it's all centered around that movie premiere.
The movie theater has become a gathering place again. It was a long time ago. We hear about the golden age of cinema and the silver screen, and it was a gathering place. It was a place that democratized art, because before that, going to the theater was something that really you had to have a little bit of money to do, and you went for the ballet, or you went for the opera, and then you went for vaudeville. But then the theater's kind of egged off, and then
you're going back that far for you, right?
Yeah, no. Well, and then what I mean, then you had the golden age of cinema that came in, and people started going to the movies and communing, and it was the democratization of art, because you didn't have to have a lot of money. You could go to the theaters for a little money, and you could watch some of your favorite books played out on film to the best of their ability at that time. You could watch, then the heydays of the musicals came in, and people packed in.
And they're creeping back, too.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it ebbs and flows. But part of that, the ebbing out, was about a decade ago or so, and the theaters were not packed. And then these huge remember we said the summer blockbuster. They'd all try to sell as many tickets as they could in the summer months to the kids when they were off from school.
Well, here's the criticism that's being brought up with this particular award. And I think this is kind of right. Can you name me the last Academy Award-winning film that was a blockbuster hit within the last 2 decades?
Well, herein lies the problem with that. The Academy Awards were not ever designed to be for blockbuster films. Yes, it's a fundamental tenet of art that someone should enjoy your art. That's right. That's a fundamental tenet of art. But that it be commercially successful has never been a tenet of art. In fact, some of the world's greatest artists were not appreciated in their own lifetime. So popularity was never a measure of the Oscars. It was about the art being judged by the other artists. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is a group made up of other filmmakers, producers, directors, actors, members. And the members decide who wins based on the art. Supposedly. I don't know if that's how it works. I'm not a member. My invitation must have been lost in the mail. But those are the guys. It's creators judging creators for that award. However, in an era when these popular films, can be they can be credited with bringing people back into the movie theater, with rescuing an industry that we all agree we love. We love good movies. We love these great stories, whether it be a period drama, whether it be a very character-heavy kind of exploration of the human condition, or whether it be a superhero movie. We love going to the theater. We just didn't love spending the money for a while. And these guys have found a way to tip us upside down and shake us until our change falls out of our pockets and bring us back to the theaters. And so that popular movies should have a category, and then that the artist judging should not be made to judge a movie on its popularity merit. We have awards for that. We have the People's Choice Awards. We have the MTV Awards. There are awards for popular culture films, but this is a chance to make popularity and success at the box office a part of the matrix for the other creators, the other artists.
It's a recognition from your peer group.
Yeah, and you might not
you've done something.
That's right. You may not have
very
done
worthwhile.
You may not have done the best, most artistic film of the year, Best Picture Award, but you were a commercial success. You had a commercial audience. You had popularity success, and maybe you did something you set trends. Black Panther set trends. Now, as an art film, I don't know that the Academy would do much by way of recognition for Black Panther. However, black director, black cast, a largely black audience coming into comic book culture for the first time in cinema, you achieved something great with Black Panther, even though it wasn't Oscar material. It was definitely a good action movie, but it wasn't Oscar material. But now it is, because it did accomplish something.
But it's strange enough to say who's not to say, because it is a recognition of their peers. And by the way, I kind of agree with a lot of people as saying we have way too many awards for every little thing that we've got. We got MTV Movie, we've got People's Choice, we got everything. And I think we have a lot that it kind of saturates what the award should be, because you could win, like.
Well, I'm curious to see.
Like Best Kiss. Or
I'm
best
curious to
on-screen
see.
Duo.
You have this category now, and the Motion Picture Academy can now take a popular film that maybe, again, isn't Best Picture worthy, isn't maybe even Best Effects worthy, but it's still a huge popular film that had a resonation with the audience. I'm curious to see what the creators, what the members of the Academy do with that category. Not just this year, because I have a good idea where this category came from and what they're going to do this year. But I'm curious to see if the artists interpret this category in perpetuity in that way. If they take films that are not just popular, they don't base them on their box office numbers only, but that are popular and actually do something, accomplish something. Because that's the category. It's not most popular film. It is best achievement in a popular film. So what was the achievement? Now, we know what the achievement was in terms of racial and ethnic equality in Black Panther, for example. What's the achievement of next year's nominees? What achievement did they obtain in their popular film? I'm curious to see what the Academy and what the members of the Academy do with that coming up down the road, because it shouldn't be just a measure of box office numbers. Again, there are thousands of those out there.
But there have been movies that have come out that have surprised us before, and they were low budget, I wouldn't say low quality, but didn't have the quality as like making one of the Marvel movies. But things like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the Blair Witch Project, they made buco bucks off of a very, very tiny budget.
Or with just a really artistic idea.
Get recognized money-wise, but they don't get recognized award-wise. But they were big movies, and they were good. And
and again, but every once in a while you get a film that makes a fair showing at the box office. It's not a blockbuster, but it's a fair showing. But something like Good Will Hunting, which is a critical success, it's a box office success to some degree, but it's an Oscar-worthy film at the same time. So when you put the perfect film together, you get an Oscar, and your peers generally recognize it, I think. But every once in a while, like I said, there's a popular movie that does set trends or break norms, and it does so in a way that is popular and successful. That's an amazing thing, and another place, your question had been, is comic culture, saturated the movie market? The other place that I think that we're finding that comic culture is spreading and nowhere near saturated yet, and that's the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, people watching at home. That's another place where the popularity of comic culture and comic movies is exploding, and reinvigorating, I think, things. And that is one of the things that brings us to our guest tonight. Our guest tonight is a comic writer and creator, and also our audience may know him from other pop culture things like Netflix's The Punisher, where he is a writer. Ken Kristensen, I'm going to make sure I pronounce that right. Ken Kristensen. Ken, are you there?
I'm here. You are pronouncing it right. Kristensen, yes.
Yes, outstanding. Thank you for being with us. Thanks, Ken, for coming on. What do you think, man? Are we saturating the market, or has comic culture got a long life left in us?
I think comic book movies are not saturated. I think that there's some that succeed and some that fail at the box office, but that's really not fatigue. The ones that fail, it's not comic book fatigue. It's mediocre or bad movie fatigue.
There you go. Well,
you see Deadpool, and it's a rated R movie, which means it's not supposed to make the kind of money that a PG-13 comic book movie can make, and it blows
right out of the water.
Most of the movies out of the water.
Yeah.
So that's because it was a great film, and then you see something like Justice League, which underperforms, and it's because it's a mediocre or bad film.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. I think it comes down to, write, produce, and direct a good film. Give them. I mean, and remember, I think people need to remember that our movie audiences today are a lot more sophisticated than they were 20 years ago, definitely than they were 40 years ago, and so on and so forth. They every year when theater goers walk into a theater, they want more. It's like their mantra. They walk in like zombies. More, more, more. They need it. And if it's not more, if you don't deliver that product, it doesn't matter how timeless your story. Justice League is a great example. It doesn't matter how timeless your story is. That story's been around. People have been clamoring for a Justice League film for as long as I've been an adult and probably a child. But they didn't show up when it wasn't more. It wasn't what they had set the bar at now.
Yeah,
the bar's been set high.
But, in the DC world, where they have been successful is on TV.
Yes. They have brought their stuff to the small screen in a huge way.
Yeah. A lot of the comics have been, because you can explore so much more during a season to have an arc than you can, I think, in 2 to 3 hours on a big screen. And I think we're going to see more adaptations of different comics.
That actually brings us back into the topic with writing. Ken, you wrote for Netflix's Punisher.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Now, typical to the TV world back in the day when you're writing for a network show or something like that, you're cranking out a script so that they can go and shoot it, and then you're cranking out another script so they can go shoot it, and week to week to week to week. Netflix drops everything on the same day, man. So you got to have everything written almost like you were writing a feature that was 10 hours long.
That's right. We typically will write almost every script before we even start shooting, so we know what, they're 13-episode seasons. So, for example, season 2, we started writing in September, so a year ago, and we basically finished writing most of those scripts before March when we started shooting. So, and now we've wrapped production on it. So, so it is a kind of it's a great model that they have, because you can really look at the whole thing as one piece, and you kind of have to when you're telling something that's so highly serialized. You really have to, you have to plot out so many
now, does it have
elements.
I was going to say, does it have challenges? I know in TV writing in particular, and I know you've done writing for other networks and things before as well. Yes. In TV writing, one of the abilities that the week-to-week writing gives you is the ability to deal with current events, or to deal with something on the fly, or something, a trend that's going on, or something like that. You can write things in that are a little more up to the minute, if not. I mean, they're not usually good pieces. They're not your favorite pieces to write because you don't get to be so creative with them, but you can deal with it kind of on the fly from week to week, whereas when you're writing something like The Punisher, you got to dive right in. You got to have 12 and a half hours written and ready to arc before you ever shoot the first one. So does that present any challenges to the writer?
Well, and what you're describing, when you can kind of take things ripped from the headlines and you're writing up until the day before you start shooting, those kinds of shows are typically not serialized. So it might be like an NCIS or a show like that where you've got 22 episodes a season, one episode stands alone from the next, and so your episode of a show like that, when something cool hits the headlines or hits the zeitgeist,
your through thread, your through thread can stay the same, but you can deal with a current events issue or a current trend really quickly and really easily. Whereas when you're doing something that's so heavily into the material, you don't have that flexibility. But you also, like you said, you get a chance to tell a story that's 12 hours long, and it's one, story.
Right, and I am right now. I'm writing the show Happy, which is based on the Grant Morrison, Derek Robertson Image comic book, and I'm writing season 2 of it right now, and we're doing it, and it is a weekly show, so it comes out on SyFy, right, and one episode a week, and yet we're doing the Netflix model essentially. I don't necessarily think it's called the next Netflix model, but for the purpose of this conversation, we'll call it that, where we wrote
we'll give them credit. They can pay us our royalties later. We'll call it that.
So we wrote almost every episode. We started shooting on Monday last week, and we wrote almost every episode before we started shooting. So I think a lot of studios, when they started doing a lot of highly serialized shows, where you are telling one story like a movie over the course of 10 or 13 hours, a lot of studios said, okay, we need to give these writers a lot of lead time. We can't do it like the old model where, you start shooting a month after you start the writer's room and you're playing catch up all year long. So
it's a great model for writers and for creative writing, because you get to sit down with your writers and go over a long arc story and the things you want to touch with every episode, as opposed to, as you said, back in the old days when they chain the writers to the table, leave them there for 10 days and come back and see what you got.
Yeah, but he gets to read comics too as part of his job, so that's got to be cool.
Good point.
Yeah, it is cool being, for me, a comic book geek like me who grew up, A, with a Punisher poster on my wall as a child, and then B, reading Grant Morrison. To be in the writer's room with Grant Morrison, writing a TV show with him has been, a dream come true, and writing the Punisher character has been a dream come true as well.
Yeah, that doesn't suck at all. That's actually a really good day.
There have to be some fun, crazy moments around that table.
All right, so when you get to sit down at that writing table for the first time, I have to ask, geek out factor. Here you sit. You're going to be writing this character. You're going to be writing with these writers. What were you going through first 5 minutes, man? What was that like?
I mean, it was funny because on the Punisher specifically, I was the comic book guy in the room. So there were 8 of us, and season 1, I was really the only one who grew up with that character in the writer's room. The other 8 writers were, veteran TV writers and pop culture nerds, but they were not Punisher nerds specifically. They weren't Marvel nerds that, to the degree that I was. I came to it with decades of Marvel comics in my DNA. I have a massive comic book collection, and so I was a little bit nervous, obviously, but I was determined to be the guy in the room who would advocate for the kinds of story choices and character choices that I thought, were true to the character and were true to what I wanted to see as a long time Punisher fan. So
that brings us to another. It's another big challenge that writers face, adapting from page to screen. When you're adapting from whether it be a comic or a graphic novel or a novel onto the screen. One of the challenges faced is getting the shots and the story told visually that you want to tell in a space that's very limited compared to a long, comic books. Even though each issue is short, are long format storytelling, because you may have 20 issues to tell your arc or whatever, whereas you have a set amount of time writing for television, writing for the screen. So. Now you're the guy you're trying to make this character as authentic to the character that you grew up in as possible. What challenges did you face in the writing room and trying to keep it, kind of the discussion that we're had where, hey, we have to do it in this many minutes. We have, 43 minutes in that episode. What were your challenges in bringing the comic book character that you love to life in a new medium?
And actually, can I add to that question just a little bit, just a little impact? What challenges did you face with people who may not have been familiar with the Punisher or had a geekdom or a background that you were steeped in that they didn't know?
Well, I was lucky in that the creator of the show, Steve Lightfoot, was really committed to doing, essentially a rated R. Netflix doesn't call it rated R. I think they call it
For mature audiences
like,
only.
They call it like 16.
MA.
I think it's actually like a little bit above PG-13. It's like PG-16 is essentially what they try to do. So you'll notice there aren't in the Marvel Netflix shows. I think they don't use the F word. So
Dina makes me turn it off because the guy comes up and says for mature audiences only, and she says I can't watch it anymore.
Yeah. So it's a so anyway, I had a creator. The creator of that show is an amazing writer, and he had come off Hannibal, which if you've ever seen the TV show, that is a grim, gruesome, no holds barred show, and that's on a regular network. So he was bound and determined to keep the spirit of the Punisher, the punishing spirit of the Punisher alive, and not pull any punches. So I didn't have to do a lot. I was the one who they would turn to and say, is there a character from the comics that we could use in this scene, rather than just making up a new character? And then I would pull from my database, and I would introduce somebody. So I had a lot of confidence in that room because I felt like, okay, I've got a role here, I've got a responsibility, and people are taking it seriously, and every writer in the room wants it to be true to what the spirit of the comic was. So, and of course, the comic is not one spirit. If you read, Garth Ennis, the satirical run, it's comedy, and if you read his post 9/11 stuff, it's very serious. So the comic does vary tone to tone based on who's writing it and who's drawing it. But, for the most part, I think we captured the Punisher in a way that made a lot of sense for TV. And what I mean by that is, like, you're adapting a character who, in the comic, a lot of the comics aren't really told from his point of view. They're told from another character's point of view. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've noticed that when you read them, but when you read them, he barely talks. Most of the comics, Punisher barely talks, doesn't have a lot of conversations, doesn't have a lot of relationships, and often his stories are told from other characters' points of view.
Yeah,
so it's very interesting.
I always got the feeling with the Punisher comics that I was sort of a fly on the wall watching things happen, that I wasn't, I was never in his head.
That's exactly right. So sometimes most of the time they'll tell the story from somebody else's point of view, or like you said, kind of an objective point of view. And then there's occasionally those types where you are in his head and you do, there's a lot of voiceover. You hear the Punisher isn't talking, but you're hearing his thoughts in the caption boxes, and it's that's something that we felt we never considered that. It wasn't going to work to have for example, a voiceover would get in the Punisher's head. So we knew, being a TV show, you want the Punisher to be the protagonist of his own show, so you want to tell it from his point of view. And
but you had a challenge. You had to let this guy talk.
Let the guy talk. Yeah. Let him have emotions. A lot of the stuff you don't see in the comic book. You don't see the Punisher having, real emotions and having real relationships. So that was a challenge. We wanted to do it where it was like, okay, the audience has to fall in love with this guy, but he has to also he has to be the Punisher. Yeah. He has to be relentlessly violent, and at the same time.
Well, I would like to compliment you and your whole writing team on the Punisher. From an old soldier, my son is a Marine, and from every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine out there, you did an excellent job of capturing what he was going through. He has a fictional story, and he has a comic book story, but at his heart, he remains a Marine, and it came through in your writing, and thank you for that, because that's something that doesn't happen very often. And
you're welcome. Yes, we did actually, take great pains to do our research, get the consultants, get the Marine recon consultants that we needed, and try to get that right.
Well, speaking of comics, I want to jump into something else. Let's talk a little bit about your new project coming out just in a little bit. We actually have Oblivion
Oblivion, yes.
Yeah,
coming out
man.
August 29th from Scout Comics. I'm very excited. This is a story that I've wanted to tell for a while. The artist is Francesco Gaston, who's an amazing Italian artist who's worked with Image Comics and Marvel in the past. And I feel like a great kinship with him over this story. This is a post-apocalyptic story, which is kind of subgenre that I love in comics and in TV and film. And I've always felt like too few stories tell the story of the event itself. What happened from the moment, for example, in The Walking Dead, right? We don't see the event.
Yeah.
We see before the event, and then Rick goes into a coma, and then he wakes up weeks or months after the event has happened. So, and you'll see that is kind of a pattern of a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction where you don't actually see the event. And so that was really interesting to me. I wanted to explore, what is the reality of an event like this? And so in this book, the event is called the Oblivion, or that's what the people who survived it call it. And but we start, hours before, and then we follow it through. So we actually see what would happen. And one of the challenges of that was, doing the research to find out how would things go awry? How, what would phone service be like?
Yeah.
I'm from New York, and I lived through 9/11, and I remember that there was phone service, but actually, most of the cell phone antennas were on top of the World Trade Center. So there was cell phone interruptions, but certain people had cell phone coverage and certain people didn't. And if you had an event that, and the event in this book is unique, it's not a nuclear event or a big violent event, but the world does fall apart, and how would it realistically fall apart? So that was a lot of fun to research and to come up with creative ways to get around some of those challenges for my character.
I thought it was really great. You said, researching and finding out about it's the little details that make the difference, and it's one of the things that it's always been a problem for, as you said, post-apocalyptic journeys, has been you usually see a little bit before the event, and then when you wake up and the after, the world's gone to hell. There's no medium ground. There's no middle ground. There's no, and it's always global, and it's always everything goes to hell. And when you wake up, you're in the middle of hell. I like the idea of exploring how we got there and what we lost along the way, one item at a time, or those things that were lost all at once. That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
Well, Ken took all the authority figures away,
which I think is really cool, by the way. I love the idea that he's exploring this from kind of a YA point of view.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to, you'll see when the book comes out, it's rated M for mature audiences, because I feel like, although there's a lot of kids in this book that are running the show, that, or teenagers and children, that being a comic book, being literature, I wanted it to be, I wanted to go places that, perhaps you couldn't go in a movie or a TV show. I really wanted to say, what would it really be like?
Yeah.
The protagonist is 17, so we meet her and a lot of her friends, and so we're dealing with a lot of these teenagers. I mean, let's be honest about what we would do.
Yeah.
If we were 17 years old and suddenly there were no authority figures around. I mean, you'd want to have a good time. You'd want to have fun. And then, I'm talking about it first. And then, of course, once you realize the seriousness of your situation, you're going to turn savage in a way that a mature adult might not, and so I wanted to explore that kind of thing too. And I also love the idea of kids can come up with, and adults can too, but I think kids probably come up with it quicker, the blame game.
I think
responsible for
this. This is almost like Lord of the Flies meets Night of the Comet.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. I love that you brought up Night of the Comet and Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies I used in the previews solicitation text. I compared a little bit to Lord of the Flies, a little bit Planet of the Apes, but Night of the Comet definitely is a reference that I love.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that during the apocalypse, our phone service will be exactly the same as it is right now.
There you go, guys. We're gonna keep talking with Ken Kristensen as we move forward. We're gonna pay some bills first. How's that sound? So stay tuned in, stay logged on. Well, you know who we're hanging with next, but just stay and see and hang with Ken Kristensen next.
How you doing, everybody? This is KG Bethlehem. I'm an author of a new book called Certain Moments of Time. It's a collection of short stories. These short stories range from post-apocalyptic, dystopian, anti-utopia, as well as general fiction. You can find Certain Moments of Time on sale at Amazon.com, where you can purchase the ebook format as well as paperback format. You can also purchase it at Lulu.com, paperback format, and will be on sale soon at BarnesandNoble.com.
Hi, I'm Cosplay Michael with the Hangin with Web Show, and you're listening to Krypton Radio. And remember, cosplay's for everyone.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Welcome back, World Wide Web. This is the Hangin' With Web Show Radio Hour. I'm GW Pomichter.
I'm Christian Basel. Welcome back, everybody.
And we're hanging with Ken Kristensen, who is a writer for some of your favorite TV properties, for The Punisher on Netflix, and has his own comic, Oblivion, due out August 29th. August 29th this year. So if you haven't already pre-ordered this, you should have. Coming out from Scout Comics, excuse me. I can't read my own notes. How do you like that? It's coming out from Scout Comics on August 29th. The Hangin' With Web Show is very familiar with Scout Comics. Our Hangin' With Web Show alumni from Scout include James Hake.
Not Cake.
James Hake. Walter Osley from the Shipper Bureau. Richard Rivera, Stabby Bunny. And, of course, again, as we mentioned, James Hake from Solar Flare and the Mall. And now we add to that repertoire the great Ken Kristensen with Oblivion. We were talking before the break about Oblivion and the fact that it deals in a very adult way with the after effects of the Oblivion, the event that takes away authority figures, among others, and the fact that it was being dealt with in a very adult way, but we put kids in the situation to have to make decisions.
Right. That's right. And, I think just to crystallize the kind of book that it is right off the bat, we meet our protagonist who's a 17-year-old girl who's got this overprotective family. They really so she wants nothing more than to have a life of her own, right? She wants nothing more than to be an adult. So that's the theme really of the series, and she has a plan, of course, on her. This is a little autobiographical on my part. On my 16th birthday, I was going to lose my virginity, right? That was my birthday present.
Oh, my.
And so she has the same plan. Her boyfriend, who's older, who's in college, he's, dating this girl who's 3 or 4 years younger than he is, and, he promises her, okay, on your 17th birthday, I'm going to give you the
brown chicken
greatest
burger.
present. You're going to going to become a woman.
I just want to point out too. The show airs. Our initial airing is on Krypton Radio every Thursday night at 7 p.m. And I want to tell you all out there on Krypton Radio, yes, Ken did say it. It is possible for a comic book geek to lose their virginity on their 16th birthday.
Oh my God!
That is correct.
That is in fact possible and has happened. As far as you know, we're telling the truth.
It's a bit unlikely.
So this is a character who's getting ready to start her Last American Virgin journey when oh shit happens.
That's right. When oh shit happens and the world falls apart. So the irony of my parents don't understand me. I need my freedom. I need to be an adult. I need to be treated like an adult. And then all the authority figures seemingly in the world disappear was really intriguing to me. And put her in a position. Be careful what you wish for.
To be the adult. It's a great turnabout to take this character that we're following and say, wants nothing more than to be adult in all of the ways that she believes that an adult is made.
And her little brother, who's blind, is kind of the bane of her existence, right? Like a lot of little brothers, little annoying little brother who, she has to babysit occasionally, and her parents kind of coddle him and give him, special privileges because he's handicapped, and all these things that really annoy her as a, selfish, insecure 17-year-old girl. And then when this event happens, all of a sudden, oh my God! Not only should I be careful what I wish for, now I've got to take care of this kid full time. Now I've got to really be an adult.
So it is. What's great is I don't think people realize the thought and the depth that goes into producing a comic. And the story that you're telling right now is literature. It is allegorical of what it is like to become an actual adult. It's not all of the things we thought it was going to be when we were 15, 16, and 17. It's all of the things we never thought of when we were that age happening to us in our 20s or our 30s or our 40s, whenever they eventually happen. And your story takes a protagonist who is on the cusp of that journey and says, okay, never mind, there's no cusp, there's no preparation, here's the journey. Have at it.
Well, and then he threw monsters in there.
Because, yes. Yes.
Yes. So you're gonna find monsters. You're going to also find weird technology. So one of the fun things about telling the story is the event itself is a mystery, not only to the people that are going through it in the book, not only to the characters, but to the readers. It's going to be a mystery that will unfold. What is going on? Why did this event happen? Who's perpetrating it? If a huge portion of the population has vanished, why did they vanish? Where are they? So I also wanted to deal with a world, unlike a lot of post-apocalyptic worlds where there's been a nuclear holocaust or a zombie virus. It's like I wanted to deal with a world where there weren't bodies everywhere. Nobody really knows what's going on, and there's that possibility of maybe this is a dream. Maybe this will all be corrected, in a week.
Maybe it can be
maybe
fixed,
these people didn't vanish. Maybe they went somewhere. Is it Roanoke Island? You know what I mean? Like, so there's this idea of like. But then our protagonist, as we follow her in the first issue, she starts to see things, like you said, monsters that she can't explain. And not monsters roaming around, but carcasses of monsters. So that is also a weird thing that she doesn't understand and that we don't understand. And all will be revealed as it unfolds. The months progress. Yes.
That's fantastic, man. That is a lot of story. Our topic tonight is the writer's table, and with what Ken just described from Oblivion, it leads into a question, and that is a lot of folks don't realize when you're watching television, especially modern television. Yes, Krypton Radio. What I'm about to say is an actual statement. Oxford University bears it out. Modern television, comic books, these are forms of literature. And there is as much thought that goes into a comic book story or a television story sometimes, or an epic movie, as there is that went into Dickens. And that brings me to my next question. You have a lot of great allegorical stuff in Oblivion. There is a lot of stuff in your television writing that goes really, really deep. When you're sitting with the other writers around the table and you're hashing out story points that you want to touch on, how much thought and how much discussion goes into the story, the human story, the allegory that you want to tell? And how much discussion and time goes into making that just the way you want it when you're putting it in your work?
I mean, we are working 40 to 60 hours a week, sitting around a table, and usually the writer's room is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But sometimes you go later. Sometimes you leave earlier. But it's really sitting around a conference table with 6 whiteboards covering every wall, and you're just filling up those whiteboards, and everybody's throwing out ideas. Was it really interesting last season on Happy, season 1 on Happy? Grant Morrison had never been in a writer's room before. So just to give you an idea of the difference between, comic books and TV, I mean, TV rooms are collaborative. Comic book writing is solitary. Grant owns a castle in Scotland, and he sits in his castle and he writes, some of the most classic comic books ever written. And well,
we're going to just double up on that. In a castle. He writes some of the best comic book characters ever written in a castle.
Because that's what you do in a castle.
That's what you do in a castle. That's exactly right. If I had a castle, that's what I would do.
I think he has 12 cats also, so he's surrounded by cats. And if you ever read a Grant Morrison comic, you'll notice he puts cats in his comics very often. But anyway, he was astounded. He had never been in a writer's room before. He was like, wow, you guys really dig deep. You dig deep. You sit here for months. Before we even write one episode, we'll have been in the writer's room for a month, every day, 40 to 60 hours a week, talking about the episodes. So he was blown away. And then, of course, you do workshop an outline, a very loose outline, and then you revise that outline, and then you revise it again, and then you give it to the studio, and they ask you to revise it, and then you give it to the network, and they ask you to revise it, and then you write a script, and then the room criticizes your script, all the other writers criticize your script, and you revise it based on that, and then you give it to the studio, and the studio asks you to revise it, and then the network asks you to revise it. So by the time you're done writing your script, you have really put it through the ringer, whereas Grant will always say, with his charming Scottish accent, the great thing about TV is that you're digging deep, you're doing multiple drafts, you're really workshopping the hell out of it, and that's great. Comic books are really first drafts. That's how he puts it. He says,
like that.
I come up with a comic book. I basically write the comic book in a first draft.
Yeah, the comparison
then I give it to the artist, and then it's done.
The comparison is incredibly apt. As a novelist, I know, compared to what you just described, my stuff might as well just come right off my laptop, because I know I kick and scream when I get my notes back, when I get pages back from the editor. So the idea of it going to the editor and then reworking it and sending it, I do it 2 or 3 times sometimes, but the idea of then it going to the next level, to a television network executive, or to the show runners or whatnot, producers, all these people involved in it.
And the other difference too with TV, and this is super important. You could write a first draft that makes it all the way through. You've done your 5 or 6 revisions or whatever, and then a week before shooting, the director and the producers are looking at it and they go, you know what? We can't afford to shoot this. Can you take out, this set piece, and can you, instead of, for Happy, for example, like instead of Nick Sachs, fighting 20 neo-Nazis here, could you, make it two guys in wheelchairs?
Wow, yeah. Can you just rewrite the entirety of what you just wrote because it's too? Wow, that's really something.
Yeah.
Now you get as a writer, you get what I think is the scariest, if not the ultimate, feedback on your written work, and that is inevitably you're going to see your writing in a visual medium. So you're going to see actors and the director put together, what you wrote in form of a show or an episode. In the case of Oblivion in your comic work, you write it, and then you get to see it come back in an artistic form, in a visual form with your artist. What's that like for the writer in you the first time you see it visually? Has it measured up to what you had in your head when you wrote it? What are some of the things that you feel when you get to see your work for the first time in a visual form?
Yeah, I think in comics, if you're picking your artist like I have done, I've never worked on a comic that I haven't actually been the one to pick the artist. So I've always selected artists whose work I love, and every single time, the script was one thing, but the art really takes it to another level. So, obviously the great thing about comics versus television is they can draw anything, and it doesn't cost anymore. So in TV you might be disappointed. There are some action sequences, for example, that you write, and in your head, it's $100 million budget in your head, and then when you actually see how it turns out on screen, you're like, that's not what I pictured.
In my brain, it was so epic, and then they pushed a hot dog cart 5 feet up the road. That was not what I saw. Yeah.
So, we have an amazing, on both shows, we have amazing stunt teams, and I gotta say, the budgets on these shows, if you really think about television budgets, they're not that big. So it's like the equivalent of doing a low-budget movie. So when you get to set and you see what they're able to do with the money that they have,
which is always amazing anyway, because we talked earlier about audiences and how movie-going audiences are more demanding than they used to be. And
right.
I think that's particularly true of television audiences as well. As you said, when you put the script together, you've got these great things in your mind. You hand it over to the showrunners and the network, and they're like, okay, now let's trim $40,000 and make this the same story. And I think again, 25 years ago when they did that, we all just would hang our heads in shame and go, oh God, my name's going to be on this anyway, and I know what they're going to put out. People maybe will like it or they won't. Today, production value for those dollars has to be that much higher for the audience because they expect so much more.
Yeah, and special effects have gotten so much cheaper over the last 15 years, so you are able to do a lot more, and budgets are getting bigger. So,
you got to write with Happy. You got to write a nice little CGI, guy that gets to be in the scenes, which is
which is amazing.
Which is really cool.
The special effects animation house that does that character, played by Patton Oswalt, amazing little flying blue unicorn / Pegasus, and he, the work that they do, 10, 15 years ago, I don't think they could have done it. They certainly couldn't. They could have done it, but it would have been like the most expensive TV show of all time, But now they're able to do it on a budget, on a Sci-Fi Channel budget, and the character looks incredible. I mean, it's like almost Pixar level animation on a tiny little TV show budget, So I'm really
not
impressed.
Actually real.
You do, I did. It was I really enjoyed Happy, in that it was dark and satirical and funny.
And Chris Maloney, who plays Nick Sachs on the show, is a comedic genius. I mean, most people know him from Law and Order, SVU, but he came up as an actor, in comedy actually, and a lot of people don't realize that, but he is an amazing comedic actor. I really wish he got nominated for an Emmy. For best comedy. It's a shame that he hasn't, but maybe next season.
I was going to say, fortunately, he's been nominated for another season, which is the best nomination you can get. It's great to say we're writers. It's always fun to say that we're creative writers and artists, but it's even better to say we're employed. That's always that's always a lot of fun. So man, that's fantastic. And again, folks, Oblivion is coming out August 29th, 2018. It's coming from Scout Comics, so be on the lookout for that. We're going to put links in the description of this episode, so you can find Ken everywhere. Stalk him a little bit. Let him know.
Please do.
Yes, let him know what you think of his work. Unless, of course, you don't like it, in which case we recommend that you sit in silent reflection and think about the choices you've made. That's usually, what we tell folks. If you don't like the art, look at it some more.
Good advice.
More episodes. That's right. That's what
I will
you need.
tell you, the cover for Oblivion is just gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Francesco
I can't say enough about what his name is. Francesco Gaston, Gaston, but he goes by Gas. So Gas, he likes to be called Gas. Gas has done an incredible job, and my favorite cover is actually issue 4. So you'll see in previews all these amazing covers. The covers actually get better and better as we go forward, but I'm glad you love the first cover.
Yeah, no, the first cover is amazing. It really is, and I look at all the faces in this room. You guys can't get over it. Gas. Yes, he said gas.
I was actually thinking.
He said it 4 times on the air, so he was really clear. Gas is amazing. That's my clickbait headline, as far as you're concerned. Why not? Wow, guys. We have got to wrap up the hour. We're coming right down to it. So we're going to go with a little bit of a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and say goodbye to our guests. So she wants us to pay the bills. I don't know why she does that to me. Go ahead and play us out.
Discarded by Michael J. Allen. In a world where magic is sold like designer coffee, unknown forces have corrupted it. And it's killing people. Now, an unlikely hero emerges. A homeless ex-con creating spells out of a trash can is the only one who can save the city. Michael J. Allen's Discarded. Available on Amazon.com.
The Hanging with Web Show Radio Hour on Krypton Radio, bringing you the very best in pop culture talk radio. Each Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, the Hanging with Web Show Radio Hour with your hosts GW Pomichter and Christian Basel, who are hanging with rising pop culture newcomers as well as superstar icons. The Hanging with Web Show Radio Hour. Tune in Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Who are you hanging with?
You're hanging with the Hanging with Web Show Radio Hour. I'm GW Pomichter.
You better be, because you're listening to us. I'm Christian Basel. Welcome back.
And we have been hanging this whole past hour with Ken Kristensen, the creator of Oblivion, coming to a comic book shop near you very, very soon from Scout Comics. He is also the writer of Netflix. One of the writers on Netflix is The Punisher, and a writer on Happy on the Sci-Fi Channel. Those are like 2 of our favorite places to go to find content, Netflix and Sci-Fi.
It's true.
That's right. So, wow. So, and we got to talk with Chris, or Ken Kristensen the whole time, and got to hear about gas. And
gas.
If you don't know what that joke means, guys, you're gonna have to go back and listen to the whole episode over again, looking for just that. So, guys, we are at our hour time, and we want to thank Ken Kristensen for being on with us for the whole hour and hanging out and listening to us banter about pop culture news and everything else that we could talk about. Ken, thanks so much for being online with us, man. We really do appreciate it.
It's been great hanging with you guys. I loved it. I love your show, and let's do it again sometime.
You got it. You got it.
Absolutely.
Guys, look for Ken Kristensen on the Hangin' with Web Show's daily interview segments coming up the road. We're going to sit down with him and try to get a video interview so we can share that with our YouTube audience. Until then, guys, remember, every Thursday, 7 p.m. on Krypton Radio, the Hangin' with Web Show Radio Hour. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m. will be the Hangin' with Web Show Indie Music Spotlight. We'll spotlight some of our musicians. And every morning between 9 and 10 o'clock, you can catch the Hangin' with Web Show on YouTube or at hanginwithshow.com. We have to wrap it up. As we do, let's say thank you to our partners and our friends at Famous Faces and Funnies, Off the Chain Radio with author Yvonne Mason, Embellish FX in Orlando, meeting all of your costuming and cosplay needs, our great friends at Something Unique Magazine, and all of you who listen to the show and listen to me prattle on hour after hour. We appreciate you. We had the good fortune of breaking into the top 10 in the iTunes podcast store this past week, and we're really excited about that. Remember, everybody, stay tuned in, stay logged on, and see who we're hanging with next.
One day we'll be in sync with that.
Yeah, man.